I shall lay with all my wives. Afterwards, they shall be sent to live in the tent inside the thick forest, till they put to bed. Whosoever among them that gave me an heir shall return back to the palace with a huge ceremony. Both the mother and the son shall ride on the giant's beautiful horse, meant for his majesty alone. Whatever the mother wishes must be done to her. But if any of them gave birth to a female child, the child shall be thrown into the lion's cave by my servants. The mother shall remain in the forest till an heir is born to King AKABA. King AKABA, the great king of Amekpo Kingdom, married 7 wives, and all his wives gave birth to only female children. Because of this, he sent his servants to go and build a tent in the thick forest close to a lion's cave. He said, I shall lay with all my wives. Afterwards, they shall be sent to live in the tent inside the thick forest till they put to bed. He said, whosoever among them that gave me an heir shall return back to the palace with a huge ceremony, accompanied by all kinds of music. Both the mother and the child shall ride on the giant's strongest and beautiful horse, meant for the majesty alone. Whatever the mother wishes must be done to her. But if any of them gave birth to a female child, the child shall be thrown into the lion's cave by my servants. The mother shall remain in the forest till an heir is born to King AKABA. Everything was done according to the king's command. All the 7 wives of the king were sent to the forest to live. 9 months later, the 7 women began to put to bed one after the other. At the end, none of them had a male child, and all their daughters were taken forcefully from them and thrown into the lion's cave, where the lion devoured them. When the news came to King AKABA, he was so angry and disappointed at all his wives. He went to the forest and laid with them again. Yet, they still gave birth to only female child, and the king did as usual. 5 years passed, and none of the king's wives were able to give him an heir. This time, something happened. After the women put to bed, the king's guard came and took them away forcefully as usual. But when it got to the first wife's turn, she pleaded for the guard to allow her throw the child to the lion's cave herself, as a way of showing how saddened and sorry she was for disappointing her husband. She did this because she was already 45 and would not be able to give birth again. The guard permitted her to do so herself against the king's command. She took her child to the lion's cave, and instead of throwing her into the cave, she gave her to her sister who lived in a distant land. She begged her to take care of the child, for she would be the last she would have, because she already approached her menopause. After she returned back to the tent, the other women despised her for killing her child herself. It was so painful already for them, seeing their child being forcefully taken to feed a wild animal, and now them doing it themselves was the worst. They excommunicated her. 10 years later, a very dangerous monster attacked the whole of Amekpo Kingdom. It destroyed their crops, animals, and was killing every human. The king sent his warriors, but they all got killed. He called for help from other kingdoms, but no one responded. All King AKABA's efforts to destroy the monster were in vain. One day, the king summoned all the chief priests of his kingdom in search of solution to their problem. It was at this gathering that the solution to the problem was found. They told the king that there was only one person who can defeat the monster, and that person was his blood. The king doubted it. He said, "How can my child defeat the monster when I had only weak bones around my house? I had no son that can face the monster. For the past 10 years I sent my wives away. None of them had given me a son." Later, after having a deep thought about what the chief priest had stated, King AKABA began to send his daughters out to face the monster one after the other, but none of them returned. They all got killed by the monster, and King AKABA became childless. After the last daughter of the king was killed by the monster, he wept. He ordered for the arrest and execution of all the chief priests for tricking him to killing all his children. Yet, they still maintained their words, saying the same thing. The king brought diviners and chief priests from other nearby kingdoms, but they still said the same thing. He became more confused. How can my blood defeat this evil when I had no child? All my daughters has been killed by the monster. Where is this my blood you are talking about? One day, while the king was waiting to place his final judgment on the chief priest, news came to the king stating that a 10-year-old girl from a distant land who had magical powers said she can destroy the monster. The king doubted it and sent them away. When the monster attack became so unbearable, the king pleaded that the young girl be brought to him. He promised to give her whatever she requested for if she destroys the monster. The little girl appeared before the king and said, "All I want is that my mother and her co-wives be brought back to the palace with a grand ceremony. My mother and I shall ride on the giant beautiful horse, and all kind of music shall accompany us home." The king at first refused, stating that was the promise he made to any of his wives that gave him an heir, and would not be granted to a stranger. The little girl made him understand that her mother she meant was the Lolo, the king's first wife. She made him regret all his actions. She threatened to go back to where she came from if the king was not willing to grant her wish. It was at this moment that the king understood the message of the diviners clearly. He agreed to grant her request. After some days, the little girl destroyed the monster using her magical power. After she destroyed the monster, the king granted her wish. Her mother and her co-wives were brought back to the palace on a grand ceremony. The little girl and her mother rode on the giant beautiful horse meant for the king, and all kind of music accompanied them home. At the same time, all the king's hostage were freed. After some time, the first wife was granted the opportunity to make her request, and her request was that her daughter be made the heir to the throne of Amekpo and shall succeed her father. This was so difficult for King AKABA, but as a king, he could not go back on his words, so he made her the heir. 2 years later, 2 of the king's wives gave birth to male child, but none of them could rule after their father because the heir had already been chosen. They can only rule after the reign of the king's daughter, Munachi.